They pushed you away, and now they can't handle the distance you created. They did not see it directly at first. It showed up in small ways that were easy to overlook. The effort changed, the tone changed, the way they responded to you became inconsistent. There were moments when you felt close to them, and then suddenly you felt like you were too much. That push and pull created confusion, but you stayed, trying to understand what was happening. You gave them space when they seemed distant. You adjusted when they became cold. When they became cold, you tried to meet them where they were, even when it felt like you were the only one doing it. At the time, you were not trying to hold on the same on you were not trying to hold on to something that was breaking. You were trying to maintain something you believed could still be real. That is why you stayed longer than you should have. But the pattern did not change. Every time you moved closer, they pulled back. Every time you tried to bring clarity, they avoided it. It started to feel like you were being managed, not valued. The more you tried to make sense of it, the more confusing it became. That confusion was not accidental. It came from from a dynamic where you were always adjusting, always adjusting, and creating they were always creating distance. Eventually, something in you shifted. You stopped trying to fix what was not being acknowledged. You stopped explaining what should have already been understood. You stopped chasing consistency from someone who was not offering it. That shift did not come from anger. It came from awareness. It came from awareness. You realized that continuing in the same way was only helping you stuck. When you pulled back, it was not loud. You did not make an announcement. You simply changed your response. You became less available. You stopped feeling the silence. You stopped reaching out in the same way. That change created a different kind of distance, one that they were not prepared for. At first, they may not have noticed. They were used to you being the one who maintained the connection. They were used to you reaching out, explaining, and trying again. So when you stepped back, it did not immediately register as something permanent, but as time passed, the difference became clear. They began to feel the absence of what you once provided. The consistency, the attention, and the effort that came from you were no longer there. The dynamic had shifted, and they were now on the side of the distance they had been creating. That is when things that is when things started to feel different for them. The distance you created was not the same as the distance they used to create. Their distance was inconsistent. It came and went. Yours was steady. It did not fluctuate based on their behavior. That consistency is what made it real. It showed that this was not a temporary reaction. It was a decision. Now now they are in a position where they have to sit with that decision. They cannot rely on you to close the gap. They cannot expect you to return to the same pattern. The space that existed now is something that it's something they have to experience without control. That is what makes it different from that is what makes it difficult for them to handle. The way they try to understand, they may try to understand why things changed. They may look back at the moment where the shift started. They may begin to see that the distance they once created had an effect they did not fully consider. They did not fully consider the way they handled things, the way they responded to you, and the way they avoided certain conversations are all part of what led to this point. At the same time, you are no longer in that cycle. You are not trying, you are not waiting for them to close the distance. You are not trying to recreate what used to be. You have already moved into a space where your peace does not depend on their actions. That space is something you build by stepping back and staying consistent, and staying consistent in the decision. The distance you created is not about punishment. It is about alignment. It is about choosing not to participate in something that requires you to keep adjusting while nothing changed. That choice is what gave you clarity. It allowed you to see things without being pulled into the same pattern. They pushed you away in a way that may not have been obvious at the time. It happened through inconsistency, avoidance, and lack of effort when it mattered. Now, they are experiencing what that distance actually feels like, not the version they controlled, but the version that come from your decision. They cannot handle the distance you created because it is not something they can manage or predict. It is steady and it reflects a change they did not expect. While they are still trying to understand it, you are already in a place where things make sense without needing them to explain anything.